2, 1. And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to a blockchain consultancy workshop. My name is Omar Abdelfattah. I am founder and CEO of Echelon Digital Consulting, a full-service blockchain consulting firm based in the DC metro area, but operating globally. Just to give you guys a quick introduction, I got into blockchain in 2016, and after a while of research, I found that the technology was pivotal in helping us integrate every different industry into the future, and seeing how much more efficient, cheaper, and how much more transparent that this technology could make future data systems as well as products. So what happened was I initially started Echelon Digital as a financial analytics / quantitative analysis company. Took me a few months to kind of get going and learn all the skills that I needed to. What I found was that this industry was very versatile in the amount of how dynamic it was with the amount of skills required to really get going a blockchain project going from idea stage to mainnet launch. It required a lot of different aspects, and along the way, a lot of new skills needed to be learned. And what I found was if you want to get into consulting, you need to be a very fast-paced learner and very energetic and demanding to learn new skills. The industry, as young as it is currently changing ever so much, and it needs a lot of attention to keep on top of all of the new different features that this industry demands. So, well, without further ado, we can go ahead and get started. So, how big is the blockchain space? 2020 estimates show that the blockchain space is currently worth around $3 billion, with an expectation to grow close to $40 billion within the next few years. The services aspect, i.e. consulting, is valued roughly at $1.62 billion as of now, and within the next few years is expected to grow to a little over $10 billion. So, the career path traditionally for a blockchain consultant is as follows. A blockchain consultant can vary in what they do. There are several different roles, from advisory to development to architecting solutions. There are legal consultants that specialize in blockchain consulting, accounting consultants as well. It shakes up the many different industries in that blockchain provides a new avenue and a new path that hasn't really been laid out yet. And everyone from lawyers, accountants, as well as lawmakers don't quite know what to make of it. And if you know anything about the blockchain space, you know it's very much on the cusp of whatever regulatory framework that is being put forward or has been put forward in recent years. It's still a relatively new industry, so it's ever so changing, and the jobs will tend to change as well. So some of the jobs here, blockchain developers, who are the core blockchain builders in every project. The developers are the backbone of the protocol / project that's being built. Blockchain architects are the ones who kind of discuss with founders what it is that need to be done in order to implement blockchain solutions. So I'll give you an example. And this is a real case example. I was approached by a founder who essentially knew nothing about blockchain and said, "Hey, I have an idea for a game with NFTs. What I want to do is I want to have people buy NFTs and then able to battle them on the blockchain with everything recorded on chain, stats being upgraded." Essentially what he said was he wanted kind of a Pokemon on the blockchain. So I said, okay, let's see what we can do here. And that involved finding the most efficient and cheapest way to build out the project. As you know, a lot of founders have a lot of good ideas for projects, but they don't quite have the capital raised to do whatever it is that they want. So as an architect, you need to work with whatever it is that you're given. And the biggest issue I see as a blockchain consultant is having clients demand certain things, but not having the money to pay for it. And it kind of gets into that rough gray area where, you know, there needs to be compromise if anybody wants to make any kind of money. So moving forward, architecting different types of blockchain development documents. The architectural documents can include everything from a flowchart, SDK components, and this essentially is what will be a blueprint for what developers will be building for the project in the future. Now, if you're a developer, I highly suggest you get into blockchain architecture, because if you can do both, you're going to be much, much better off. A project manager is essentially just someone who manages every aspect of the project, essentially operates as the COO of the project that's being conducted, and they will do everything from mobilizing developers, the marketing teams, getting up all the press releases, and making sure the community is satisfied and everyone's doing their job. Analysts can be really all sorts of different occupations. I think blockchain analyst will most likely, if that's what you're going to end up searching up, you're going to find someone who does more on-chain analytics. And there are on-chain analytics companies that study different movement between blockchains, whether it's payment reconciliation or fraud protection, or people going through different blockchains, but this requires a very, very good technical understanding of the blockchain. A UX designer is usually a Web3 developer that helps essentially port the World Wide Web to the blockchain in a way that's user-friendly. And they build out the user interface mainly using React. And this helps port over the user interface onto the website that requires different blockchain services. And the rest of the jobs as well, like we said, there are many, many jobs going forward that require, like a legal consultant, there's accounting consultant, the engineer will work alongside the developers, the quality engineering as well, more quality assurance. There are a lot of different blockchain jobs that are required in order to get a good project going, is how we'll say it. And these are very much up for grabs. These are very much in high demand. They're very good paying jobs. And a lot of these different companies don't mind working remotely, especially in today's age. And really, the jobs, like we said, are ever so changing. So if there's something that you're interested in, make sure to keep up to date with what people are doing in this space, given the very, very nuanced job titles. So today we're going to take an example of a blockchain a solution, and we're going to try and architect one together. So first case is this. The MinorityProgrammers is an international organization that wants to turn all functions of their business to a scalable blockchain decentralized application. They are building a minority token to incentivize users for rewarding mechanisms, and part of this application is going to give rewards for learning crypto, providing mentorship, taking consultancy work, investing in startups, and etc. So the requirements are as such. Develop a proposal for the decentralized app and develop use cases for the application. This is essentially architecting what the blockchain will do in what way possible. We'll give kind of the use cases for how the blockchain is going to interact with the outside world, its customers, its user base, everybody that would be involved, and essentially simulating what that application will be doing exactly. Developing tokenomics. Now, this in blockchain consulting I find to be rather fun. when you have a project that wants to understand the best method for tokenomics, it will differ with each project. It isn't a copy and paste method. So for certain projects, you want to understand if you need more money to go to development, or it's something that's going to need more marketing. If it's especially earlier on going to be very volatile in trading, you're going to maybe want to provide more liquidity. And your job as an architect is going to have to justify exactly how you allocate each section to how much of the tokens. On top of that, you're going to have to try to figure out the burning and minting mechanisms, i.e. the deflationary slash inflationary dynamics that will be going into the token, and this will be simulating it in the long term to kind of help sustain the token price as well as the project for as long as possible. This involves a lot of different understanding the psychology of the retail traders and people involved in the space, the user base as well. And oftentimes you can implement something like a staking mechanism to incentivize long-term holding, which essentially decreases sell-side pressure by allocating a certain amount of the tokens in circulation to a reward pool. Therefore, if there's any kind of growth in user base, the token price should be expected to increase. And like I said, with each project, it will differ. You can't use staking mechanisms in all projects. Burning and minting could be a good idea for certain projects, and for certain ones it wouldn't be. It really depends on what the client will want going forward with the kind of application that is being built. So if anyone wants to share their idea, you can go ahead and pitch it to me as if I was the head of the company or the client, and give me your best idea as to a solution for this Minority Programmers dApp.
Can you go back to the slide so we can see the requirements too?
Sure.
Yeah. So can I kind of get some insight on the what is usually like the split between marketing and development, and like providing liquidity, or like how does it really differ for projects usually?
So the way I see it is this: working with different VCs. If you ever want to go the route of private equity and raising funds, VCs typically like to see at least 20%, 20 to 30% of your tokens allocated towards marketing. If you're launching on a decentralized exchange, which is a very popular option for smaller stage startup projects nowadays, you're going to probably want about 40% in liquidity. The team should not be any more than 10%, anywhere between 5 to 10%, depending on the length of the project and the time put in. And this is something that will have to be kind of justified to the client, the user base, because it's all really up to them. If they think, well, if the team's taking too much money, I don't see this going anywhere, they're going to take their tokens and sell them. They're probably not going to join your community and be a part of your application. Development costs can vary, again, depending on how technically demanding the blockchain developing is. So, again, different projects will differ. And then on top of that, there's usually, the way I do a lot of different tokenomics, there's usually a small rewards pool for either airdrops to get people involved. They're a very good way to really get some attention early on, using our alongside marketing to get people. I mean, a lot of those people who receive and reclaim airdrops are going to just sell them off. But on top of that, there will be a wider user base overall, and there's different mechanisms you can use for maybe a vesting period. If you sign up early and you want to get more users earlier on, you can reward them as well. And this is essentially all you have to think about is these tokenomics are going to be public, and if they're followed to the degree that they say that they are, that's going to be up to the community. So usually the less team The more marketing, the more development, more liquidity is going to be better. But obviously, there's only 100% of the tokens, and you can't use all of them multiple times over. And so that's kind of where you come to tokenomics. If you think maybe there's too much in circulation after a pre-sale, you burn the remaining tokens, which decreases the circulating supply, which could be better for certain people. But otherwise, burning can be seen as a desperation attempt to raise the token price, and in which case it may not be successful. You have to take everything into account when making kind of these decisions, and therefore it's integral that you know what you're talking about and at least have mentored with other projects, if not worked with them, before you make these decisions that are going to be permanently impactful for the livelihood of the project. But yes, does anyone have an idea? I think this is the first case right here. Essentially building any kind of decentralized app for the functions of the business for minority programmers, and any kind of incentivization methods for rewards. If anybody has an idea to share, go ahead.
I don't have an idea per se, but I just kind of have an insight that's a little bit different than that needs to be kind of noted. Is like that unlike an airdrop, like where it's incentivizing early users, like this system is intending to reward for actions throughout the ecosystem, and it's like that seems like a selling point. So it's like how do you make kind of how do you make a bigger reward pool, and like where do you take from, and like how do you sustain that was something like that was a question there. So that's something.
Sure. So essentially what you can do is, the good thing about blockchain is you can kind of code whatever parameters you want into a certain system, especially a decentralized application. So if you want, what you can do is, if users are rewarded for essentially providing mentorship or taking consultancy work, they can be paid through the app. And then if they use the token, maybe they earn more rewards. Those rewards can come from a staking pool that has a vesting period or a lockup period for a few months, and that can kind of facilitate and pay for the extra reward systems for going forth with learning about the cryptocurrency. These are all essentially associated with a wallet address, which would be your profile. And whatever it is, if again the token price increases and there's more onboarded users for this minority token dApp, what would happen is users would be incentivized to hold them more, stake them more, earn rewards, and then the ecosystem would then go ahead and increase. So this is one example that I can see with this hypothetical use case. But if I look here, use cases for the application. So yeah, that would be one of many use cases. What I think, if I think of another one here, minority token incentivized users for rewarding mechanisms. So what you could do is, similar to Coinbase, they have rewards for they have different partnerships with different crypto companies, and they reward users for learning about those projects by going through the videos, taking a quiz. And the idea behind this is, if users learn more and more about whatever protocol or whatever token that they're working with, they're going to have a smaller, but they're going to have a small set of those users who are actually going to stay. But in the long term, if those users stay, those users bring on more, and you can incentivize people to come on your platform by offering them these short-term rewards. Now, you have to understand that at the same time, a lot of these people are just here for the money. But I believe what Coinbase did is they found out that they were losing a little bit of money, and they were offering people, let's say, $5 maximum to learn about a coin. Users couldn't sell or withdraw those those $5 because they required a $15 minimum. I think a lot of the different applications like Lolly, which is a kind of a shopping Bitcoin-backed rewards app, is using a very similar incentivization method where you need a certain minimum on the app, which requires you to be using that application multiple times over in order for you to actually withdraw your rewards program. So the minority token could incentivize a model like that. And yeah, if there's any other use cases than the two that I've come up with, I'd be happy to hear it. Does anyone have any questions as of now?
So coming to the other point, can I kind of get an explanation of like burning versus minting and like just having like a total supply, like when you choose one versus the other, whether you're like actively like minting new stuff or you just supply at the beginning.
So what you can do is this. Let's say a pre-sale is pretty successful, but you have leftover tokens, and those tokens really had no place in your tokenomics. Now, where do they go? With these tokens, what I would say is this: burn a good amount of them, so that way users don't think that they're being just taken back to the team wallet and being sold off. There's a lot of scams in this space, and people are very much afraid of having essentially being rug pulled or having the team sell off their tokens at their expense before they can get listed. So if it shows good faith if a certain amount of those tokens are burned. On top of that, minting would require usually is associated with an inflationary method. Now, with minting, it could be a good idea if the project requires you to have, for example, if the project was if the project required more and more tokens as the ecosystem was developing. But that protocol would have to be established ahead of time. And it's very hard, in my opinion, in today's ecosystem to have an inflationary token than a deflationary one, unless it's very much rewards based. So if you're minting more and more tokens because you need to keep up with the reward, that may decrease the price in the short term. But if you're expecting long-term results, which a lot of different projects are, but fail to do so, then it would be a good idea. Now, I typically have not seen a use case or with any of the projects that I've worked with where minting would be a good idea. And explaining burning to different project CEOs, especially that don't have any blockchain knowledge, is a bit, let's go ahead and say, chaotic. They just see it as trying to explain trashing the supply where it could be used for other things, and how can that be good? And to explain to them that, well, if you burn a lot of these tokens, you onboard more users. The token price itself it should go up in the short term, but on top of that, it shows good faith, and it may onboard more users in the long term instead of, let's say, using those extra tokens for short-term marketing now. But like I said, I prefer a combination of both burning and other mechanisms in order to try to help the user base feel a lot more comfortable with the tokenomics of the project. Awesome. Okay. So the major blockchain consultancy groups are currently Consensus, Applied Blockchain, Hashcash Consultants, and hopefully soon, Echelon Digital. A lot of these different groups typically charge very, very high rates, as they're very much in demand. They're the top tier in the industry, and it's very difficult to get a project through them if you don't already have private equity funding pre-revenue. So it's always a good idea to check out other local consultancy groups, depending on the scope of the project. And for smaller startups, Echelon Digital works typically with smaller startups, and takes those ideas from founders and people who kind of don't know what to do with the project, but just have a good idea and want everything architected and developers mobilized and marketing done, all of the and all of the above. Okay, so second use case. In order to decide the decentralized application, the minority programmers want those who hold the MPA governance token to decide what happens within MPA decentralized app ecosystem that is run on the minority token. So the requirements would be to design strategy for the distribution of the governance tokens, the minority holders, pre-sale. So how will these proposals be submitted, and what kind of levels of know your customer will you have, and how will you prevent voter manipulation? So governance tokens were very, very popular in 2017 and 2018. I think governance tokens today have been kind of integrated into the main tokens protocol and the parameters that the coin is built with ahead of time. But essentially, a governance token in this case would go as follows. What you could do is you can have certain token holders of the MPA vote, whether it be a majority or 60 to 70% majority. This would obviously be a protocol that has been already coded into the blockchain. And what they would do is increase or decrease rewards based on current market conditions. They could decrease the staking pool, increase a lockup period, and decrease vice versa. There's many different ways where if you were a holder of the MPA governance token, hypothetically, what you could do is you would be able to have the voting rights, and the more of the governance token that you held, the more that the voting rights would go. On top of that, what you could do is you could dictate whether certain nodes should be established, and that way that increases the amount of international contributions that would occur in the space. So if you wanted to set up nodes in every city, and in order to earn MPA governance token, you would essentially provide electricity and hash power for the MPA governance token being minted. And I think this would be a good example of that, of the minting we discussed earlier. But yeah, so the design strategy for the distribution of the governance tokens would be essentially this is where you would, as a founder of the company or a COO, kind of dictate the best way to go about this, because at the end of the day, tokenomics and distribution of the different tokens are all to kind of comfort and increase the user base. If you don't have a good user base, token price is going to go down. You're not going to have active users, and the project is really going to die out pretty fast. So what you want are good mechanics for both governance and tokenomics, because that's really what's going to be driving the future of the coin price post-launch.
I have a question about like governance in general. Like when is it traditionally like people invest in governance coins for like the price speculation, or is it like strictly the vote? Like how do you decide whether whether it's a utility or whether people are speculating on the governance? Like what are kind of examples where like people care about the price of a governance token?
Sure. So usually, when you conduct a pre-sale in order to pay for development and everything, and you have, let's say, you have a 3-month period of development pre-launch. Usually, everybody who's involved is most people, at least involved, will be speculators. That's just the way that works for different projects. A lot of people flop around between projects expecting to get in at a very, very cheap price, as cheap as you can get, which would be the pre-sale. And then when the project launches, they're not very supportive of the project or haven't been. They move on to the next project that does the same thing. And that's something I've noticed with a lot of different projects I've worked with, is you'll just have those speculators regardless of how good or bad a project is or what you do to incentivize rewards. There's people there only for interest in quick token capital gain. What you want to do, however, is with governance tokens, what I find is that just like everything else, there's usually a quick allocation of a very small subset of people that acquire a large portion of those governance tokens. And earlier, you're going to have maybe one or two whales that buy up all the governance tokens or mine them all for themselves. And what happens is, if people start catching on more and more, they are essentially met with more and more retail traders that buy up the governance tokens, essentially taking away power from a lot of these different whales. And the successful projects usually become more and more decentralized as they grow in their in their development post launch. So just like everything else, it's a quick couple of people making decisions for people, and if people don't like that and they like the project, they'll usually buy it up. Now, what you can do is you can kind of have an address whitelist, and yeah, if people want to go make multiple wallet addresses and dodge that, it usually has a bit. It usually deflects a few people and at least helps out the project by only allowing certain wallet addresses holding a certain maximum of the token, at least in the pre-sale. However, yeah, whatever proposals that you guys may have or ideas for governance going forward with this idea, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind hearing, or any questions for that matter.
I'm like, so like what I'm trying to, because this is like a utility that runs the ecosystem, and then like the governance
Mm-hmm.
to build it. So where is it like that in other projects those are the same coin, so that leads to speculation of the governance? Like, how do they split it up, or like what's really done?
So yeah, with certain projects I've worked with, usually one of those tokens is staked, and the utility token is usually earned through staking rewards. So it's very inflationary in that matter. But in this case, the minority token would be the utility token, which would be used to make the payments for different consultants, earning rewards for education. And the minority token could be used for a number of things, or the MP token could be used for multiple things in governance, including those rewards, the transaction fees, if there are any on top of whatever the blockchain demands, updates and upgrades to the system, voting on whether it be something analog. If they want to host an event, if the minority programmers want to host an event somewhere and people are unsure where to host it, you can have a community vote for where the event should be held, and they could be all on chain. So there's different use cases for the governance token in allowing what the minority token, essentially how far it will go. But the mechanisms for them could, it could be staked. You can maybe you have to be forced to buy MP tokens, and that will determine the amount of minority tokens based on however much they're staking and for how long. There's really multiple ways to go about doing it, but that's just one or two of the ways that I can see happening with this use case.
So what if you want every person in the community who like to have a say and be an active kind of community member? Like what do you think is the best strategy for it? Because there's like it's saying here like airdropping to everyone who has minority. So if you have minority, then you maybe got it from a platform, and then like now you can vote on the platform. Is that what people do, or is it like how do people aside from like resales get
Sure.
governance token?
The way I've seen is the less complicated, the better. I actually have heard of exactly what you're talking about, and if users have to go to multiple different websites and they have to go to one exchange to get one token, and it's not all aggregated onto one site or one platform, it becomes very difficult. People typically are lazy, and if they see that there's too much work involved in even just trying to understand the mechanisms by which govern the protocol, they are typically turned off, and they're no longer users. If anything, they may still be holders, but they're definitely not users. And so for an application like this, you're going to want as many people in the community as possible. And so the way you would, I think, essentially establish the governance token is this. Users would swap for the MP token originally. The only way to get the minority token would be through staking, and obviously staking rewards, if there's a vesting period, maybe 3 months, you get a certain percentage of minority tokens, and then after 3 months, if you haven't withdrawn any, you get more, and the token levels can go up, and that can always be voted on. So there could be like staking tiers, but if you want to have more minority tokens, you're going to have to buy more MP, and essentially that's how I see the best way in this application of both having a good MP and minority token in the long term. Because if you're going to have users, they're going to want the minority token to be paid in it. They're going to need MP as well. And the more MP that they have, the more control they'll have over the actual application, and the more say that they'll have going forward, which will entice competition on the application itself. And this will give all of these tokens essentially a good price point, at least a good price floor going forward.
So what do you like in terms of like, this is kind of like dealing with like minority communities and like marginalized people, so it's like
Yeah.
the consideration of like the economic thing being a barrier to entry, or something like that. So if you have to stake it, then you have to kind of have like money to begin with. So how would you address a dilemma like that, where you kind of want more people who might not have the economic advantage to even get any of these tokens? Like how would you work around that?
Well, what you could do is this. You could have essentially a reward system set up. So if people earn essentially that buy the MP tokens and stake them, and if you are a programmer wanting to earn money for a certain project, you would be the ones. Essentially, a whale would come in, buy the MP token, and earn rewards on the minority token that would go back into the pool. And as a minority programmer, what you would do is you would earn your money, and then maybe a very, a 1 or 2% fee would go towards the MP stakers who are minting and mining the governance, the utility token for you. And that way, the actual programmers who want to use the service as, service professionals, what they would do is then they would not have to actually pay anything. There would be no barrier in entry in terms of wanting to earn money. But if you are providing the money, you would be given a small percentage of that transaction fees going forward. That's one workaround.
Huh. Yeah, so I'm kind of, it's like also like another consideration with the kind of level of exploitation, or like the next last question of KYC is like like what are people voting on? There's like the thing where you said with the events where it's like analog, but then there's stuff like 1inch where it's like they vote on like the parameters of the exchange, and like that has monetary, advantages, and that brings in kind of greed, so that like incentivizes, like you were saying, a lot of people early on to get the governance and to have a stronger voting power. So how do you like kind of like what is a way to account for that in the distribution, based on like, does it like vary based on like the type of things being both voted, or the type of governance on the platform? Have you seen by chance?
Sure. Well, this is what you would do. I think the best way in general, at least philosophically, in order to prevent fraud in any ecosystem, is to decentralize it as much as possible. So what could happen is this. Maybe there's only things that are voted on are, something like fees. Obviously, if you have more MP, you're going to want more fees, and you're going to be voting on the higher fee rate, and you're going to keep raising the rate as much as possible to get as many tokens for yourself as possible. What we could do is in the protocol, what would be voted on would be, like you say, the reward mechanisms. If the token gets to a certain price point, what you would do is then it would decrease rewards or increase rewards. You could have essentially no governance in the amount of rewards being taken at all, and just in the rewards of the blockchain itself, and essentially the verification methods for governance, like we said, nodes earlier, or maybe needs a majority vote or a minority vote. depending on what it is that you would like to vote on. But like I said, this application is still very much a hypothetical. I mean, you would still need to see what kind of protocol it's built on top of, whether it's Ethereum compatible, it's Cardano, or essentially whatever it is. Because those governance those governance tokens are only going to do so much based on the protocol that they're involved in, and that comes back to architecture and figuring out what it is that you want. And the distribution of the governance tokens again may not require a staking method, but it's much better to have a staking method because as much as it does unfortunately impact new users, if or users later in the chronology of the actual project, if you have users earlier on who have been a part of the project for let's say 3 to 4 months, and someone comes in with a lot more money, they wouldn't be able to outbid or outvote someone who has been staking for a while. So it couldn't necessarily be built more on a vesting period and less so on the amount staked. But then you would absolutely need tiers still, because there would be no point in for a lot of people to be onboarded if there's no more rewards for buying more. And the overall ecosystem would be would benefit from having more users. And so the reward system can be kind of manipulated a little bit every now and then, but if you're just using it as a contractor providing certain services, that really shouldn't affect you too much, because you're still being you're not paying, you're being paid. And so this would also something that, if it was a bit contentious, could go to a community vote, and those were the government's tokens would you would only get one token, let's say, per address. And if you want to go the route of trying to do a workaround, getting multiple addresses, there's only so many you'll be able to do in a period of time. So there's still room for defrauding the system, but at least minimalizes it.
So like one thing about this is like, how do you, like, other than the staking incentives and stuff, and this is kind of throughout both the governance and the reward systems in general, like how do you keep user engagement as like rewards go down, or like how do you like design a system that like aside independently from blockchain that like um or even a reward system that like incentivizes long-term use, because all the usually rewards you're talking about are for like the early adopters, but like
Sure.
what are strategies for like sustained rewards, like, or sustained at least involvement in governance, or
So the involvement in governance would go as such. I think I'm not sure if this will answer your question, but I think if you add a vesting period, maybe every quarter, let's say you have a certain amount staked, your influence or your ability to vote on certain things would go up based on not how much you have, but how long you've been staking a certain token. And therefore, if you've been in the space for much longer, you would be able to have more influence in the space than someone who came in with more money just now. And that's, in my opinion, probably one of the better ways to do it. And it depends on the livelihood of the project. If it's something like, if it's this example that we're discussing of this decentralized application, the best way that I can see going forward would essentially be to give people who have been doing much more work more governance. So if you are a verified contractor, and let's say you do consultancy work for it, and if you have, let's say, 10 verified use cases, so maybe every 10 you get a certain reward for working with the decentralized application, and that would come from the MP holders' staking rewards. That's the best way that I could see long-term use, is by offering rewards for people that use it for longer, and people who stake it for longer, that would be the same thing, is increasing the rewards for the length held, and you would have essentially a vesting staking module.
so are these tiers of rewards and staking, like how is technically kept track of? Is this like a reputation system, or is it like how is
Um,
the technically?
well, the reputation system is more for the actual users of the product. If it's staking, it would essentially be a smart contract built on chain to track a certain wallet address. It would be by wallet. So if the tokens essentially haven't moved or if let's say you have to hold a certain amount in the wallet at all times, once you reach a certain threshold, whether it be a certain amount or a certain amount of tokens or a certain length of the token held, you would then qualify for the next tier of rewards. And so that could be kind of organized and architected based on a number of things. You could do, like we said, every quarter, if the tokens haven't moved from that wallet address would have the right to the increased tier system for the staking rewards. And on the other side, if it were users of the actual application, if they if you have a wallet address with a smart contract that goes through successfully after services have been rendered, what you would do is you could set a certain amount of you can have a certain amount of tiers. For example, let's say if you've been on the if you've, let's say, 10 successful contracts completed, you would then qualify for maybe some bigger contracts. So if the contracts were earlier on were a little bit smaller, you wouldn't qualify for the bigger ones unless you proved yourself otherwise on the application first. So that's how I see that going about. And I think this is what we've been discussing, is how will users learn how to use governance tokens for voting in the Minority Programmers application. This industry, integrating blockchain solutions, as we discussed earlier, there's a lot of different methods. It's more efficient, it's cheaper, especially when dealing with larger amounts of data movement, and it does provide an extra layer of security because one that is decentralized. And in an era of hacks where there's only one point of attack, I mean, if you have enough hackers who put in enough effort to try and capture a certain amount of information, they're going to get it, whether it be a large institution or whether it be a government. All it requires is one point of attack. So as a product of the massive interest in blockchain, corporations no longer have a choice digitizing their company if they want to stay competitive. And that's kind of what we're seeing here, is all sorts of different consulting firms. Accenture now has just won a contract for 5 pilot programs for central bank digital currencies. Deloitte has a consulting firm, and they're hiring blockchain solutions architects left and right. EY, PwC, all of the big firms are seeing the potential in blockchain on top of not just services, but in terms of investments. VCs, even in times like this, are raising billions of dollars worth of funds to invest in future blockchain companies in basically every industry. So there's an increased demand and use for it, and it is projected that roughly 30% of projects will obtain production in blockchain technology within the next few years. And that's where people like you guys come in, who want to get involved in the space and want to be a part of bridging that gap between today and tomorrow, and building that future infrastructure for all of us, really. And so there's something for everybody, and I'd be happy to take any kind of questions. My socials are here if anyone is interested. That's my Twitter, my personal, and then my business as well, for Echelon Digital. And then if there's any inquiries or any applications for work, you can go ahead to echelondigital.com and shoot me a message. I'll get back to you within 24 hours. But that's really it. If there's any questions that anyone would like to ask about blockchain consulting or the industry as a whole, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yeah, did you notice, like, during bull markets, is the type of consultancy work, like, what's the nature of the consultancy work? Like, how does it shift in, like, bull versus bear markets, and the type of projects that people want, would you say, if you were to generalize?
So in bull markets, what you see is a lot more shit projects. People can kind of sell anything in a bull market. People will invest in anything. what people all they really have to do, and let's say they launch on a decentralized exchange, whatever kind of project that is that they want. As long as it's pegged to the price of Ethereum, let's say if it's an Ethereum trading pair on Uniswap, the price of that token's on nominally going to go up, whether it be, the trading pair itself is going to go up or not. And people tend to get really, really euphoric and kind of put money wherever they can find it, and they like to shift around a lot more. In bear markets, people are a little bit more careful. They get a lot more greedy. They're usually very, very anxious to put money in a new project. They'll put money more in established projects, and what I've seen is kind of a cycle where projects that have gone through a bull market and did well, they survived the bear market, are now mid-tier projects and will be invested in the next bear run. But if you're a project that's just launched and it's your first bear market, for example, you kind of just have to weather the storm. And what I've seen is that companies and projects that have put a lot more money aside for runway will survive. And, those who kind of just, spend all their money on development and marketing, and they really ran out of funds, they rushed to VCs to get kind of bailed out for, a little bit of money that'll keep them going through the bear market. And so bear markets are a lot more difficult to start projects. People are a little bit more anxious, but in bull markets, you'll have, I would say, roughly 5 to 6 times the amount of projects being started. Because if the price is going up, people think, okay, I'm going to get on that, and my idea is golden. But they kind of rethink their idea if it's the same one, and the market's going down, and say maybe it's not the time to do it, and then they overthink it or rethink it. But there's a lot more work for consultants in a bull market. Let's just say that. In a bear market, it usually comes back to features, adding features and developing new items for established projects instead of startups. It's very difficult to successfully launch a startup in a bear market.
Awesome. Well, thank you for providing all that insight, and I definitely want to gain some more insight from you in the future. That was very helpful. And yeah, so thanks for coming.
Thank you.